Captain Riley Morrison stood on the bridge of her ship called Aurora Edge and stared at the impossible signal coming from her screens. The dead system of Valdris Prime was sending them music from old Earth, but that could not be right because no human had ever been to that place before. The music was beautiful and sad, like someone singing a lullaby to the stars. Riley had heard this song before when she was a child, and her grandmother would sing it to help her sleep. But how could aliens know this music when her grandmother had made it up herself? Her second officer came running to her side with worry in his eyes. "Captain, we are getting orders from Earth Command to stay away from that system. They say it is too dangerous and we should return home immediately." Riley looked at the signal again. The music kept playing over and over like someone was calling to them from across the empty space. She had been exploring unknown worlds for 10 years and had never found anything like this. The chance to make real contact with aliens was too important to ignore. Against all orders, Riley told her crew to set course for Valdris Prime. Her ship moved through space toward the mysterious planet, while the strange music guided them like a lighthouse in the darkness. As they got closer, they could see that the planet was covered in crystal cities that sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight. The landing was smooth and quiet. Riley took 5 of her best people down to the surface in a small shuttle. The air was clean and smelled like flowers mixed with something she could not name. The gravity felt normal, and the temperature was perfect for humans to breathe and walk around. What they found on the surface made Riley forget everything. She thought she knew about aliens. The city was more beautiful than anything humans had ever built. Towers twisted up into the sky like they had grown from the ground, instead of being constructed by machines. The buildings seemed alive somehow, with walls that moved gently like they were breathing. In the center of the crystal city stood a palace made from one giant green stone that was so big, Riley could not see where it ended. The doors opened by themselves as the humans approached, and soft light spilled out to welcome them inside. Everything was quiet except for their footsteps echoing in the hallways. Riley led her team through corridors filled with floating lights that followed them like curious pets. The walls were covered in pictures that moved and changed, showing scenes of space battles and beautiful worlds that no longer existed. The deeper they went into the palace, the more Riley felt like she was walking through a dream. Finally, they reached a throne room that took Riley breath away. The ceiling was so high she could not see the top, and the walls were covered in stars that actually twinkled like real night sky. In the center of the room sat a throne, carved from pure emerald, that was bigger than her entire shuttle on. The throne sat the most beautiful woman Riley had ever seen. She had long silver hair that seemed to glow with its own light and violet eyes that looked ancient and wise. Her skin was pale like moonlight, and she wore a dress made of what looked like liquid starlight that moved and flowed around her body. Beside the throne lay the biggest creature Riley had ever seen in her life. It was a dragon with scales that changed color from deep blue to purple as it breathed. The dragon was easily as big as the largest whales from Earth, but its eyes showed intelligence that was clearly not animal. The woman on the throne spoke in perfect English with a voice like music. "Hello, Captain Riley Morrison. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you and your people. I am Queen Lirelei, Night Whisper, and this is my companion Shadowfang. We are the last of our kind." Riley felt her heart racing, but she managed to stay calm. "How do you know my name, and how do you speak our language?" Lirelei smiled sadly. "I have been watching your species for many years as you spread across the stars. Your people fascinate me with your courage and determination to explore the unknown. My own people once ruled hundreds of worlds, but now only Shadowfang, and I remain." The dragon raised its massive head and looked directly at Riley with eyes like liquid starlight. She felt something touch her mind gently, like a whisper that she could almost but not quite hear. The sensation was not frightening, but it was unlike anything she had ever experienced before. "Your people call this first contact," Lirelei continued, "but that is not accurate. We have been studying humanity for decades to decide if you are worthy of what I must ask of you. I need your help, Captain Morrison, and in return I can offer your species knowledge and power beyond your current understanding." Riley found her voice again. "What kind of help do you need from us?" The queen stood up from her throne and walked toward the humans. Her movements were graceful, like she was floating instead of walking. Shadowfang followed behind her with steps that made no sound. despite the dragon's enormous size. There is something coming, Captain Morrison. Something that destroyed my people and will destroy yours too if we do not work together. The enemy that killed my civilization is awakening, after sleeping for 50,000 years, and when they return they will devour every living thing in this galaxy. Riley felt cold fear run down her spine. What kind of enemy could destroy an entire civilization that had magic and dragons? Lyra Lay reached out and touched Riley's hand gently. The touch sent warm energy through her body that made her feel stronger and more alive than ever before. They are called the Devourers, and they exist in the spaces between realities. They feed on the life force of entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty husks floating in space. My people fought them with everything we had, but we were not enough alone. They all. Queen looked directly into Riley's eyes with an expression of desperate hope. But your people have something. Mine never had. You have the ability to adapt and change faster than any species I have ever encountered. You find new ways to fight when the old ways fail. That is why I have been waiting for you. Riley realized that this was not just a first contact situation. This was a recruitment meeting. The beautiful alien queen needed humanity's help against an enemy that could destroy galaxies, and she had been studying them to see if they were strong enough to be useful allies. Shadowfang made a low rumbling sound that Riley somehow understood meant agreement. The dragon was supporting whatever plan its companion had in mind. What exactly? Are you asking us to do? Riley asked. Lyra Lee smiled, but there was sadness in her ancient eyes. I am asking your people to join me in a war that will determine the fate of all life in this galaxy. I can teach you to use weapons and defenses that your science cannot yet imagine. But the price of this knowledge is that humanity must be willing to fight beside us against horrors beyond your current comprehension. Riley looked around at her team, who were all staring in amazement at the dragon and the beautiful alien queen. She knew that her next decision would change the course of human history forever. The music from Earth continued to play softly in the background, as if Lyrelei was still calling to them across the stars, waiting for their answer. Jake Morrison had made many difficult decisions during his military career, but shaking hands with an alien queen, while her dragon watched, might have been the strangest. Queen Lyrelei withdrew her hand and gestured toward her ship. "Follow me, Captain," she said. "We have much to discuss and little time to do it." Jake signaled his Marines to lower their weapons but stay alert. The group followed the Queen and her dragon companion into the mysterious vessel. The interior was even more amazing than the outside walls curved and flowed like living things, and soft light came from everywhere at once. The dragon Vorthak barely fit through the corridors, but moved with surprising grace. For something so massive, Jake noticed that the ship's passages seemed to expand slightly as the great creature passed through them. They entered what appeared to be a command center filled with displays that showed three-dimensional images floating in the air. Queen Lyrelei touched one of the controls, and suddenly, Jake could see the entire battle from orbit. The Devourer ships looked even more threatening from this angle. They were massive, ugly things that resembled diseased insects grown to impossible size. Smaller craft swarmed around them like parasites, feeding on a host. But as Jake watched, he began to notice patterns in their movement. The aliens were not attacking randomly. They were following a careful plan designed to capture, rather than simply destroy. "They want your people alive," Lyrelei explained, following his gaze. "Living beings provide better nutrition than corpses. The Devourers will harvest every human on this world unless we stop them." Jake studied the tactical display with growing understanding. The enemy was herding civilians toward collection points while eliminating military resistance. The plan was efficient and cruel in its simplicity. Sergeant Kane appeared on one of the communication screens. Her face was tight with stress. "Captain, we have maybe an hour before they overrun the main shelters. The civilians are starting to panic." Jake looked at Queen Lyrelei, who was studying the display with those brilliant violet eyes. She touched another control, and the image zoomed in on one of the Devourer ground forces. The creatures were horrifying to see up close. They stood upright like humans, but their bodies were covered in chitinous armor that grew from their skin. Rather than hands, they had sharp claws designed for cutting and tearing. Your weapons cannot penetrate their Natural armor, Lyrelay said matter-of-factly. Their exoskeletons are harder than most metals, but they have weaknesses that humans might exploit. She gestured and the display showed the joints between armor plates. Jake could see that the creatures moved with insect-like precision, but that same precision created predictable patterns. The dragon Vorthak made a sound that was almost like speech. Lyrelay nodded as if understanding perfectly. She turned to Jake with something that might have been a smile. My companion suggests that human unpredictability might confuse them, she said. Devourers think in terms of hive logic. They cannot adapt quickly to individual creativity. Jake felt his tactical mind engaging fully. This was the kind of problem he had trained for all his life, finding weaknesses in superior enemies and exploiting them with limited resources. He activated his comlink cane. I need you to redistribute our remaining heavy weapons. Focus on mobility rather than fixed positions. We are going to try something different. What kind of different? Sir Kane asked. Her voice carried the caution of someone who had seen too many desperate plans fail, the kind that involves an alien queen and her dragon. Jake replied, Trust me on this. One Lyrelay was already moving toward what appeared to be an armory section of her ship. The walls opened to reveal weapons that looked more like works of art than tools of war. They glowed with inner light and hummed with contained energy. This will work against devourer armor, she said, selecting several devices. She handed one to Jake and it felt warm in his hands. The weapon seemed to adjust its grip to fit his fingers perfectly. Jake studied the alien weapon. It had no obvious trigger or sights, but somehow he understood how to use it. The knowledge seemed to flow directly into his mind from the device itself. Vorthak will provide air support. Lyrelay continued. While I assist your ground forces, we must coordinate our efforts carefully. The Devourers will adapt quickly once they understand what we are doing. They returned to the command center where Jake began planning the counterattack. He used his knowledge of New Haven terrain, combined with Lyrelay's understanding of Devourer tactics. The plan was risky, but it might work. Human forces would strike from unexpected angles while the dragon attacked from above. Queen Lyrelay would use her powers to create opportunities. Jake was curious about those powers but had not yet seen them demonstrated. The Queen clearly possessed abilities beyond normal understanding. Her ship alone proved that her people had mastered forces humans could barely imagine. The attack began at sunset when Devourer vision was less effective. Jake led the first strike team through maintenance tunnels beneath the colony. The alien weapon felt natural in his hands despite its strange design. They emerged behind enemy lines where Devourer forces were collecting human prisoners. The creatures were so focused on their harvest that they did not notice the approaching humans. Jake gave the signal and his team opened fire. The alien weapons cut through Devourer armor like paper. The creatures fell without understanding what had killed them. Their hive mind had no experience with these particular energy signatures. But the real shock came when Queen Lyrelay joined the battle. She moved like flowing water between enemy positions. Her hands glowed with the same energy as her weapons, but far more intense. Jake watched in amazement as she touched a wounded Marine. The man's injuries simply vanished, leaving behind healthy skin. The Queen had healing powers that defied everything he knew about medicine. Overhead, Vorthak announced his presence, with a roar that shook buildings. The dragon dove from the clouds, breathing streams of energy that turned Devourer aircraft into falling debris. The counterattack was working better than Jake had dared hope. Human creativity combined with alien technology was proving devastatingly effective. The Devourers began falling back toward their landing zones, but Jake noticed that Queen Lyrelay was holding back. He could sense that she possessed far greater power than she was using. The question was, why would she limit herself during such a crucial battle? They regrouped in a captured Devourer position to plan the next phase. Jake found himself standing close to the alien queen. She radiated warmth and energy that made him feel stronger. Your people fight with great courage, she said. Her voice carried respect that warmed Jake more than he expected. Most species flee when they see Devourer ships. Humans are too stubborn to run, Jake replied. We prefer to dig in and make the enemy pay for every inch Lyrelay laughed, and the sound was like silver bells. Her amusement made her eyes shine brighter. Jake found himself staring into those violet depths and forgetting about the war for a moment. "Tell me about your homeworld," she said. "We have so little time. But I want to understand what drives your species to fight hopeless battles." Jake described Earth and its blue oceans while explosions echoed in the distance. He talked about human history and the long struggle to reach the stars. Lyrelai listened with intense interest. "My people once ruled much of this galaxy," she said quietly. Her expression grew sad and distant. "We thought ourselves invincible until the Devourers came. What happened to them?" Jake asked gently. "They died." Lyrelai replied simply, "All of them except for a few survivors scattered across space Vorthak. And I are perhaps the last of the royal bloodline." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. This beautiful, powerful queen was carrying the weight of an entire, dead civilization. She and her dragon were living monuments to extinct glory. The comlink crackled with Sergeant Kane's voice. "Captain, the main Devourer force is regrouping for a massive assault. They have brought up reinforcements from orbit." Jake looked at Queen Lyrelai, who was studying her tactical displays. The numbers were not encouraging. The enemy had overwhelming superiority, despite their recent losses. "We need to hit them harder," Jake said. "But I sense you are not using your full power." While Lyrelai was quiet for a long moment. When she looked at him, her eyes held secrets that were older than human civilization. "Some powers come with terrible prices," she said finally. "What I am truly capable of would end this battle. But it might also." Jake felt something cold grip his heart. The idea of losing this amazing alien queen just when he was beginning to know her seemed unbearable. "Then we find another way," he said firmly. "We use human ingenuity instead of alien power." Lyrelai smiled and touched his face gently. Her fingers were warm against his skin. "You are an interesting species, Captain Morrison. I have not felt hope in many centuries, but you make me remember what it was like." The moments stretched between them, filled with possibility. Then the ground shook as Devourer heavy weapons began their bombardment. The final battle for New Haven was about to begin. Jake looked into Queen Lyrelai's violet eyes and made a silent promise. He would find a way to win this war without requiring her to sacrifice herself, but first they had to survive the night. Riley's message to Earth Command caused exactly the reaction Lyrelai had predicted. Admiral Kate Henderson assembled the largest fleet humanity had ever sent to one location. 12 massive warships carrying enough firepower to destroy entire planets. The Admiral message to Riley was simple and direct: arrest the alien, surrender all technology, and return to Earth immediately. Riley stood in the Crystal Palace watching the human fleet approach on Lyrelai viewing screens. The ships looked tiny compared to the dragons, who was now flying lazy circles around the Crystal City, as if the arriving warships were nothing more than annoying insects. "You knew this would happen," Riley said to the Queen, who was sitting calmly on her throne despite the approaching threat. Lyrelai smiled sadly. "I have been studying your species for decades. Captain Morrison, fear and suspicion are natural responses when faced with something beyond your understanding. Your Admiral Henderson believes that superior numbers will allow her to take what she wants without paying the price. I am asking." Shadowfang landed on the palace roof with a sound like thunder that shook the entire building. Riley could feel the dragon's amusement through their growing telepathic connection. The massive creature was not worried about the human fleet, and that confidence was both reassuring and terrifying. Admiral Henderson's voice crackled through the communication system, demanding that Lyrelai surrender immediately and submit to Earth authority. The tone was aggressive and threatening, as if the Admiral was speaking to a defeated enemy rather than a potential ally. Riley watched Lyrelai's face grow cold with anger for the first time since they had met. The Queen stood up from her throne, and her eyes began to glow with violet light that made the air around her shimmer with energy. "Your Admiral is about to learn why dragons were once feared across the galaxy," Lyrelai said quietly. "What happened next would be remembered in human military history as the day arrogance met ancient power. Admiral Henderson ordered all 12 ships to target the Crystal City and open fire at the same time. Hundreds of energy beams and explosive missiles streaked toward the palace in a coordinated attack that should have destroyed everything within miles. Shadowfang roared once, and the sound seemed to come from everywhere. At the same time, every weapon fired by the human fleet simply stopped working. The energy beams flickered and died. The missiles fell harmlessly to the ground, and the ship's power system shut down as if someone had flipped a switch. The entire fleet was disabled in less than 5 seconds without a single human being harmed. Riley could see the confusion and terror on the bridge crew's faces as they realized their most advanced weapons were useless against abilities they could not understand. Counter-Admiral Henderson tried to re-establish contact, but found that her communication systems were also dead. Shadowfang had used what could only be called selective electromagnetic magic to disable everything dangerous while leaving life support and basic systems untouched. The demonstration was over quickly, but the message was clear. Earth's most powerful military force was helpless against Etherian abilities. The balance of power was not even close to equal, and Admiral Henderson's newfound respect for alien capabilities was obvious in her suddenly much more polite requests to negotiate. Lyreley allowed the human ships to restore their systems, and Admiral Henderson came down to the planet's surface with a much smaller escort and a much more humble attitude. The meeting in the Crystal Throne Room was tense but productive, as the Admiral realized that cooperation was the only viable option. After hours of difficult negotiations, Admiral Henderson finally agreed to work with Lyreley, but the Admiral also made it clear that Earth Command would never accept alien leadership. The humans would fight alongside the Etherians, but they would not surrender their independence or submit to foreign authority. That evening, Lyreley asked Riley to walk with her through the palace gardens. The area was filled with plants that seemed to glow with their own inner light and flowers that sang soft harmonies when the wind touched them. The air smelled like springtime on Earth, mixed with exotic perfumes that had no names. The two women walked in comfortable silence until they reached a fountain carved from a single piece of crystal that reflected the light of 3 moons overhead. The water glowed with the same blue light as the palace crystals, and made musical sounds as it flowed. Riley had been expecting this private conversation ever since the confrontation with Admiral Henderson. She could sense that Lyreley had something important to say, something that could not be discussed in front of the other humans. Could you ever marry someone like me? Human, Lyreley asked quietly. The question hit Riley like a physical blow. She had been expecting discussions of military strategy or technology sharing, not a marriage proposal from an alien queen. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge that would change everything. Riley stared at the beautiful elf woman, trying to process what she was hearing. Marry you, she repeated. Lyreley's face was serious as she explained the ancient laws that governed Etherian royal magic. To share her power with another species, she would need to take a bonded partner, someone who could become her equal in both war and leadership. The ritual would grant the partner access to dragon abilities while creating an unbreakable telepathic link. It is not just a marriage in the way your people understand it, Lyreley continued. It is a joining of souls that would make you something new, neither fully human nor fully Etherian, but capable of commanding both kinds of power. The bonding process would also extend your lifespan to match mine, so that we could face centuries of challenges together. Riley felt overwhelmed by the implications of what was being offered. She would gain incredible power and knowledge, but she would also have to leave behind her human life forever. The telepathic link would mean sharing every thought and emotion with someone from an entirely different species. What would happen to me physically? Riley asked. You would remain mostly human in appearance but with enhanced abilities, Lyreley explained. You would be able to communicate telepathically with Shadowfang channel mystical energies through technological devices and perceive threats that exist partially outside normal reality. Your military training combined with these new abilities would make you uniquely qualified to lead the combined forces. Riley walked closer to the fountain, thinking about everything she would be giving up. Her career in Earth military, her relationships with other humans, her entire identity as a member of her own species. The decision felt too big and too permanent to make quickly, But she also thought about the visions of the Devourers consuming entire worlds and the billions of humans who would die if they could not find a way to defeat the cosmic predators. Lyrelay was offering the only hope for survival, but the price was her humanity itself. Shadowfang appeared silently beside them, his massive form moving through the garden without disturbing a single plant. Riley could feel the dragon's calm presence, in her mind offering reassurance and support. The creature had accepted her completely despite knowing her for only a few days. "Why me?" Riley asked. "There must be others who would be better suited for this." Lyrelay smiled and touched Riley's hand gently. "You have something that cannot be taught or learned through training. You have the ability to make impossible decisions under pressure and find solutions that others cannot see. That is why Shadowfang chose you." Riley looked into the dragon's ancient eyes and realized that the creature had been evaluating her from the moment they first met. The telepathic connection she had been feeling was Shadowfang's way of determining if she was worthy of the bond being offered. The choice was ultimately simple. Even though the consequences would be life-changing, Riley could accept Lyrelay's proposal and help save both their species, or she could refuse and watch helplessly as the Devourers consumed every living thing in the galaxy. Long-range sensors were already detecting movement in distant star systems as the cosmic predators began to stir. Time was running out and decisions had to be made quickly. Riley looked at the beautiful alien queen who was offering to share power responsibility, and her very soul with a human she had known for only a few days. The trust required for such a bond was staggering, but Riley could sense Lyrelay's complete sincerity through their growing telepathic connection. "I need time to think about this," Riley said. Finally, Lyrelay nodded, but her expression was worried. "We do not have much time. The first Devourer scouts will arrive within months, and we must be ready to face them together or separately." Riley knew that her next words would determine the fate of two entire species and possibly every living thing in the galaxy. The weight of that responsibility was crushing, but she also felt a strange sense of destiny, as if everything in her life had been leading to this moment. The 3 moons overhead seemed to be waiting for her answer, along with the dragon and the alien queen, who had trusted her with the most important decision in galactic history. Riley made her decision the next morning as she watched the sunrise over the Crystal City. She found Lyrelay in the palace library studying ancient texts about the bonding ritual and told her that she would accept the proposal and everything it meant. The ceremony took place that same day in a chamber deep beneath the palace where the walls were covered in symbols that glowed with their own light. Shadowfang lay in the center of the room, while Lyrelay and Riley stood hand in hand above. A circle carved into the crystal floor. Riley felt energy flowing through her body as Lyrelay spoke words in the ancient Etherian language. The sensation was like being struck by lightning, except instead of pain, there was warmth and strength and a growing connection to minds that were not her own. When the ritual was complete, Riley could feel Shadowfang's presence in her thoughts as clearly as if the dragon was speaking directly to her. She could also sense Lyrelay's emotions and memories, creating a bond deeper than anything she had ever experienced with another person. The enhanced abilities came immediately. Riley found that she could see energy patterns invisible to normal human vision and hear sounds from across vast distances. Her reflexes were faster, and her strength was greater than any human could achieve naturally. But the bonding ceremony had been detected by Earth Command long-range sensors, and Admiral Henderson received new orders that changed everything Earth leaders had decided that Riley was now a traitor, and that Lyrelay was too dangerous to be allowed to live. 3 days later, the largest fleet in human history arrived at Valdris Prime. Admiral Henderson led over 200 ships carrying 50,000 Marines, with orders to capture or kill the alien queen and seize all advanced technology. The Earth government had decided that humanity could handle the Devourer threat without alien help. Riley stood beside Lyrelay on the palace balcony watching the massive fleet take up attack positions around the planet. She could feel Shadowfang anger through their bond as the dragon prepared to defend his home against the people Riley had once served with. Admiral Henderson sent one final demand for surrender, but Lyrelay's response was to activate the planet's ancient defenses. Crystal Guardians began emerging from the ground around the city. massive constructs that had been sleeping beneath the surface for thousands of years. The Battle of Valdris Prime began. At dawn, when human forces attempted a coordinated assault on the Crystal City, Riley found herself in the impossible position of fighting against her own former comrades. But the telepathic bond with Lyrelai and Shadowfang left no doubt about where her loyalties now lay. Human tactics proved to be brilliant even against an enemy they did not understand. Admiral Henderson had learned from the previous confrontation and deployed her forces in ways that minimized their exposure to dragon attacks, while maximizing their numerical advantage. Riley watched with mixed pride and sadness as human commanders adapted their strategies in real time, finding ways to use conventional weapons against magical defenses. The flexibility and innovation that Lyrelai had admired in humanity was on full display, even when directed against the alien queen herself. But Etherian power was beyond anything the humans had prepared for. Shadowfang moved through the battle like a force of nature breathing antimatter, flames that could destroy entire squadrons, while Lyrelai manipulated gravity to disable ships without killing their crews. The Crystal Guardians proved to be nearly indestructible constructs that could absorb energy weapons and respond with beams of pure force that cut through starship hulls like paper. Each Guardian was controlled by Lyrelai will and moved with perfect coordination. Despite their massive size, Riley's role in the battle was unique because of her bonded status. She could coordinate both human tactics and Etherian magic, creating strategies that neither side could have developed alone. Her knowledge of human military doctrine combined with her new mystical abilities made her a formidable opponent. The turning point came when Riley used her connection to Shadowfang to disable the human flagship without killing anyone aboard the Dragon. Precise electromagnetic control allowed them to shut down the ship's weapons and engines while leaving life support intact. Admiral Henderson found herself floating helplessly in space, watching her most powerful vessel drift dead in the water, while a human woman who could apparently control dragons flew past her viewport on the back of a creature the size of a building. But the real end of the battle came when long-range sensors detected something that made both sides forget their differences. The first Devourer scout ships were emerging from dimensional rifts throughout the galaxy, and they were heading directly for inhabited systems. Riley watched the sensor readings with growing horror as the cosmic predators began their approach to populated worlds. The scouts were smaller than the main Devourer force, but each one was still capable of consuming the life force of entire planets. Admiral Henderson's voice came over the communication system, requesting immediate assistance from Lyrelai forces. The human fleet had detected the approaching threat and realized that their weapons were completely useless against enemies that existed partially outside normal reality. Shadowfang launched himself into space without hesitation, racing toward the nearest Devourer scout ship at speeds that defied physics. Riley could feel the dragon's determination through their bond as he prepared to face an enemy that had destroyed his people once before. The confrontation between Dragon and Cosmic Predator was visible to both fleets as Shadowfang engaged the scout ship in battle. The creature antimatter breath weapons had no effect on human technology, but they could wound entities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Devourer scout ship was destroyed in minutes, consumed by dragon fire that burned in spectrums of energy that normal matter could not produce. Riley felt Shadowfang's satisfaction through their bond, as he proved that the ancient enemies were not invincible when faced with the right weapons. Admiral Henderson watched the destruction of something that her entire fleet could not have, scratched and finally understood the true scope of the threat facing humanity. The cosmic predators were beyond anything Earth science could comprehend, but the alien queen and her dragon had just demonstrated that they could be defeated. The Admiral sent a formal request for alliance to Queen Lyrelai, offering Earth unconditional cooperation in exchange for the knowledge needed to fight the Devourers. The pride and arrogance that had started the battle was replaced by desperate recognition of humanity's need for alien help. Riley stood between the two forces that had been trying to destroy each other minutes before, and helped negotiate the terms of the most important alliance in galactic history. Humanity would provide tactical expertise and numerical superiority, while the Etherians would supply mystical weapons and dimensional warfare capabilities. The bonding ceremony had created exactly what Lyrelai had hoped for, a leader who could bridge the gap between human innovation and alien power. Riley found herself appointed as joint commander of the combined forces with authority over both species, military assets, as the two fleets began working together to prepare for the approaching Devourer invasion. Riley realized that the war between humans and Etherians had been just the beginning. The real battle for the survival of all life in the galaxy was about to begin. Shadowfang landed on the palace roof and looked up at the stars where more dimensional rifts were beginning. To appear, the dragon could sense the approach of the main Devourer force and knew that they had only weeks to prepare for a conflict that would determine the fate of every living thing in existence. Riley stood beside Lyra, watching the combined human and Etherian fleets take up defensive positions around the planet. The alliance had been forged in battle and tested by necessity, but now it would face the ultimate challenge against enemies that had destroyed civilizations spanning hundreds of worlds. The cosmic predators were coming, and this time there would be no place to hide. The bonding had changed Riley in ways she was still discovering. As Queen Consort, Riley Morrison Night Whisper, she could now perceive threats existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously and communicate telepathically with Shadowfang across vast distances. Her human tactical thinking combined with Etherian mystical abilities created possibilities that neither species had imagined alone. The alliance between humans and Etherians produced innovations that amazed both sides. Human engineering merged with mystical energy sources to create weapons that could wound creatures existing partially outside reality. Etherian dimensional magic guided human targeting systems with precision that made impossible shots. Routine. Riley stood in the command center watching as the combined fleet prepared for the final confrontation. The main Devourer force was approaching from the space between galaxies, and long-range sensors showed entities the size of moons that existed in several dimensions. At once, Admiral Henderson had become one of Riley's most trusted advisors despite their rocky beginning. The human admiral understood military logistics, while Riley could coordinate mystical defenses, creating a command structure that utilized the best of both species' abilities. Shadowfang had grown stronger through his bond with both queens. The dragon could now channel human technology through his mystical abilities, becoming a weapon system unlike anything that had ever existed. His breath. Weapons were enhanced by human targeting computers, while his natural armor was reinforced with energy shields based on Earth science. The first wave of Devourers emerged from dimensional rifts just outside the solar system where Valdris Prime was located. The cosmic predators were even more horrifying than Riley remembered from the visions, beings of hungry darkness that seemed to twist reality around themselves just by existing. The battle began when Shadowfang led a squadron of enhanced human fighters into direct combat with the smaller Devourer scouts. The dragon movements through space defied physics as he used dimensional manipulation to appear and disappear around his enemies. Riley watched through her telepathic connection as Shadowfang engaged creatures that had once destroyed entire worlds. The dragon breath weapons now burned with energy that existed in multiple dimensions, simultaneously allowing him to wound enemies that normal matter could not touch. Human pilots, flying beside the dragon, adapted their tactics in real time, learning to use dimensional portals that Lyrelai opened for them to attack Devourers from unexpected angles. The combination of human innovation and Etherian magic created fighting techniques that confused and disrupted the cosmic predators. But the real challenge came when the largest Devourers emerged from the dimensional rifts. These entities were so massive, they had their own gravitational fields and existed simultaneously in normal space and the void between realities. Riley realized that defeating creatures this large would require more than weapons or tactics. It would require the kind of coordinated effort that only their unique bond could provide. She linked her consciousness fully with both Lyrelai and Shadowfang, creating a three-way telepathic connection that allowed them to function as a single entity. Through this enhanced bond, Riley could direct human tactical thinking to guide Etherian power with unprecedented precision. Lyrelai's mystical abilities were focused by human strategic planning, while Shadowfang's raw power was coordinated by military doctrine that had never been designed for dimensional warfare. The largest Devourer was attacked by the entire combined fleets simultaneously. Human ships provided covering fire, while Etherian constructs channeled dimensional energy, and Shadowfang struck at the creature's core across multiple reality levels at once. Riley felt the cosmic predator confusion through the telepathic link as it encountered coordinated resistance unlike anything it had faced before. The creature had consumed countless civilizations, but never one that combined mystical power with tactical innovation in this way. The battle lasted for hours as more devourers emerged from the dimensional rifts, but each victory made the alliance stronger. Human crews learned to work with Etherian magic, while alien technology adapted to human strategic thinking. Shadowfang proved to be the key to victory as his enhanced abilities allowed him to strike at devourer dimensional cores, the part of each creature that existed in the void between realities. Human targeting systems guided his attacks while Etherian magic amplified his natural weapons one by one. The cosmic predators were destroyed not by overwhelming force but by precise strikes that disrupted their ability to exist in multiple dimensions. The devourers found themselves vulnerable for the first time in their existence as the Alliance exploited weaknesses that no single species could have discovered. The final victory came when Riley used her bond with Shadowfang to coordinate a simultaneous attack on all remaining devourers at once. The Dragon Dimension hopping abilities allowed him to strike multiple targets across vast distances, while human coordination ensured that no enemy escaped. When the last cosmic predator was destroyed, Riley felt a profound sense of completion through her bond with Lyrelai and Shadowfang. They had accomplished something that the ancient Etherian Empire could not achieve alone, and proven that cooperation between species could overcome any obstacle. In the aftermath of the war, delegates from dozens of hidden civilizations emerged from their hiding places to join the Alliance species that had survived the previous Devourer invasion. By concealing themselves, now felt safe enough to make contact with the victorious forces. Riley and Lyrelai found themselves ruling over the Council of United Worlds, a new government that spanned multiple galaxies and included every known form of intelligent life. The alliance that had begun with a marriage proposal had grown into the foundation for a new golden age. Admiral Henderson was appointed as the first human representative to the Council, while keeping her position as fleet commander. The former adversaries had become close friends, bonded by their shared experience of fighting an enemy that threatened all existence. Shadowfang had become something unique in galactic history, a dragon bonded to two queens from different species. His enhanced abilities made him the most powerful single entity in known space, but he used that power to protect and explore rather than conquer. Riley stood in the council chambers on the capital world that had been built specifically for the new government. Representatives from hundreds of species worked together to plan exploration missions to distant galaxies where other survivors might be. Hiding the marriage between human and Etherian had created more than just a military alliance. It had proven that differences between species could be strengths rather than obstacles. When channeled through mutual respect and shared purpose, Lyrelai had taught humanity that there were forms of power beyond technology and weapons, while Riley had shown the Etherians that adaptation and innovation could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Their bond had grown deeper over the months since the final battle. The telepathic connection now allowed them to share not just thoughts and emotions, but also dreams and memories, creating a partnership that transcended the boundaries between species. Shadowfang served as both mount and advisor, flying the two queens to distant worlds where they established new colonies and made contact with civilizations that had been isolated for millennia. The dragon enjoyed having two bonded partners as much as Riley and Lyrelai enjoyed sharing his ancient wisdom. The exploration missions discovered wonders beyond imagination. Worlds where entire continents were covered in crystal forests that sang in harmony. Civilizations that had learned to live inside the cores of stars. Gas giant planets, where creatures of pure energy danced through atmospheric storms that lasted for centuries. Riley often thought about how different her life had become from the day she first received the mysterious signal from Valdris Prime. She had gone from being a simple starship captain to co-ruling a galactic government that included species she could never have imagined. But the most profound change was personal. The bond with Lyrelai had given her a partner who understood her completely, while the connection to Shadowfang had opened her mind to ways of thinking that no human had ever experienced as they planned their next expedition to explore galaxies beyond the reach of previous civilizations. Riley realized that their greatest adventures were still ahead of them. The universe was vast and full of mysteries that would take lifetimes to explore. Shadowfang coiled contentedly around their shared throne, dreaming of new worlds to discover and protect. The dragon had found purpose again after millennia of hiding, and his happiness radiated through the telepathic bond that connected all three of them. The alien queen had asked if Riley could ever marry someone like her, and the answer had transformed not just two individuals, but the entire galaxy. The power of love and partnership had proven stronger than cosmic horror, and the future belonged to those brave enough to reach across the void between different forms of life. Together they would explore the infinite possibilities that awaited among the stars.